Okay, welcome to INWED Talks, an initiative of the Women's Engineering Society celebrating International Women in Engineering Day. As WES's flagship campaign, INWED highlights the achievements, contributions and impact of women engineers while inspiring future generations to pursue careers in engineering. These INWED Talks are a series of conversations exploring the INWED 25 theme of Together We Engineer through various lenses, and this INWED Talk focuses on allyship in engineering, exploring the experiences of two of our Men as Allies Award finalists about their experience and reflections on the role of allies in creating an equitable engineering industry. We'll explore how male allyship can help shape a more inclusive and equitable engineering landscape to support the industry growth and innovation goals we will only achieve through engaging a diverse talent pipeline. And to do this, I'm really delighted to welcome Professor Ed Rochead, Commissioner for AI, Autonomy, Data and Cyber at the Ministry of Defence. Welcome, Ed.
Thank you.
And Dr. Andy Palmer, founder of both Palmer Automotive and Palmer Energy, and both of whom are award-winning advocates for their work in creating a more inclusive and diverse engineering industry. So I'm hoping you'll share your perspectives on the crucial role of men in shaping the future of industry. Welcome, both of you.
Hello, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Let's dive in. It'd be really great if you could briefly introduce yourselves. Andy, maybe you could go first, please.
Oh, thank you. So Andy Palmer, I would call myself a car guy at its simplest level. I've spent most of my career, 46 years in fact, basically in the car industry, a long time at Nissan, 23 years in fact at Nissan, where I eventually aspired to be the chief operating officer of Nissan, living there for 13 years in Japan. And spending a lot of time in Southeast Asia. I'm in China today, as you see behind me.
Amazing.
I then went on to be the CEO of Aston Martin for 6 years, which was a privilege and a pleasure. Such an iconic brand. Yeah. And then during my period of time at Nissan, I was the architect of a car called the Nissan Leaf. Leaf is arguably the first mass production electric car. It wasn't the first electric car, they go back an awful long way, but yeah, it was the first mass production. And so as I left Aston, I wanted to get back to doing something that I wasn't able to do at Nissan, which was to create a net zero form of transportation rather than simply a zero emissions. So the rest of my career has basically been concentrating on attaining that net zero for transportation, setting up a company called Switch, which was a company that creates the electric double-decker bus in London, going on then to be the interim CEO of a company called PodPoint, which is the largest charging network in the UK, and currently working with Brill Power, basically to bring Oxford Electronics to the battery business, and liaising with a company that I created, which was Palmer Energy and Palmer Automotive. So that's my career. Thank you.
Amazing, amazing stuff. I have to say, I've got a background in energy, so all of that is really so interesting and such a dynamic field at the moment. Really great. Indeed. Thank you, Andy, for being with us. Ed.
Thank you. Well, I'm sort of almost the other end of the spectrum, that I've been in the public service all my career. So it's I joined the MOD as a mathematical modeler on graduating and have stayed at the ministry ever since, carrying out a range of roles in applied research, in operational research, and in physical sciences, but then moved into leadership. I spent a lot of time program managing MOD's research program into aircraft safety, which was wonderful because it was everything from the engineering of aging aircraft to the psychology of aircrew, and was known as the airbag of bits program, and I loved that. I then moved into strategic partnering and discovered a real passion for making people and organizations sort of find their common goals and synergies to work together to make the whole greater than the sum of the parts. And about 2 years ago, I got my current role, where I'm commissioning the research that the MOD will need to carry out its mission long term. And alongside that, I've been active in sort of what my wife calls my semi-professional life. Some of the major things have included, until a year ago, I was chair of a charity that conducted used drama to bring out the best with adults with learning disabilities. I've seen adults with learning disabilities act Moliere and Shakespeare, which is amazing. And I've also have visiting roles in a couple of universities, and I'm on the governing body of another one. And I think my real thing that I'm passionate about is bringing different disciplines together and getting that innovation on the interfaces of them. So I'm really passionate about how the arts, design, STEM subjects and humanities can really work together for the good of society and the individuals involved.
That's so amazing, Ed. And I think that it's so lovely to have you two together. To have one of the things we're trying to do at Women's Engineering is really bring in the research piece. So I think traditionally we've done quite a lot for women in industry, and actually now we're making sure that we are doing a bit more of a holistic view of women in engineering and capturing that research piece, because they're two sides of the same coin, really, aren't they? But yeah, both of you, I'm exhausted listening to those intros. Amazing stuff. Let's dive into allyship, and perhaps I can start with you, Ed. What does being an ally in engineering mean to you? And I think you may have sort of started to touch on it there in your intro. And how did you first become aware of the need for active allyship?
So I think I've been thinking about this in preparing for this session, and I think I realise I take what the philosophers would call a utilitarian approach to allyship and equity, and that is that essentially for organizations to thrive, the individuals within them need to thrive as well. And I think it's all about from a utilitarian point of view, it's the allyship assists everybody in that organization to thrive, which helps the organization to thrive. And I think that is and that also links to, as you alluded, my earlier point about working at the interfaces and getting innovation from people from different disciplines and backgrounds. How I got into it was through my then employer, the DSTL, the Defence Science and Technology Laboratory, ran female mentoring circles, so that the smaller number of female colleagues had female mentors who were able to mentor them. And if they liked, those mentoring circles could also appoint a male buddy who was generally a friend of the female mentor. And I was appointed to a couple of those by friends of mine who were mentoring, and sort of opened my eyes and to some of the issues that were going on in the organization. And then on top of that, the thing that really crystallized it was I watched a TED talk on why a man should care about gender equality by somebody called Michael Kimmel, which I would heartily recommend.
I've seen, it's good, it's good.
And that sort of got me hooked.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And now racking my brain, if anyone's interested in sort of looking a bit deep, well, a non-philosopher looking at philosophy, I did read a really great book by Michael Sandel. So I'm now racking my brain to try and remember what all of that is. But that's brilliant. Thank you, Ed. And I think it really brings out that piece around mentoring, which is that it is a two-way process. So, you were in there to do one thing, but actually what you were doing at the same time was listening and learning for yourself. So I think that's a really great quality that you've obviously brought to the table there. So thank you for that. Andy, what about you? What does being an ally mean to you, and how did you first become aware of the need for it?
Honestly, if you boil it down, I see it as a competitive advantage.
Yeah.
And so I know that we shouldn't probably look at everything through the financial eyes, but I'm a car guy, as I said. When one tries to design a car, one has to remember that it's not just a middle-aged white guy that's buying it. It's a diversity of people that hopefully are going to be buying your car. And it always struck me as very odd, and 50% of the people going to buy your car are women. It always struck me as very odd that we were very good at designing, engineering cars for guys, but not very good at taking into account our female customer requirements. And I guess you can do that, as traditionally car companies have done, by surveying and garnering opinions. But by far the best way of doing that is to have the car engineered by a multitude of different people coming from different backgrounds, different genders, different education, and mixing that in. So rather than relying on very unreliable intelligence documents or surveys or clinics, bring, in this case, women into the workplace as part of the engineering team, and automatically you'll gather a lot of that information. So rather than, for example, crash testing and ergonomics that normally engineered around a 99 percentile guy, which means they're totally inappropriate for a 5 percentile woman. And so that doesn't happen when part of your packaging team, part of your safety team is women, because they go, hey, you're forgetting about this important aspect. So I just think we make better cars as a result of a more diverse organization, and that can apply to ethnic diversity as much as it can to gender diversity.
Yeah, I think that's right. And thank you for bringing things back into more of my comfort zone, which is looking at business strategy. And I think that's so important, that piece around baking inclusion into every aspect of your operating model, so that you can deliver those business goals. I think that's a really great insight, and actually the way I think about it as well. So that's really interesting. Thank you. So many organisations talk about supporting women in engineering, but real change does require action. And I'm interested to learn from both of you what you found to be the most effective ways that perhaps you as leaders in your organisation have actively supported gender equity in engineering. And maybe I can start with you, Andy, on that.
It dawned on me when I was working in Japan. Japan has a very low gender diversity by makeup of its culture, I guess. And for all the reasons that I mentioned about making more competitive vehicles, we needed more women in the workplace. But we were finding that women were being excluded for some of the key jobs through the filter system. So through the natural inborn bias of the way that a recruitment process works, you apply for the job, you go through a number of interviews, and eventually you come to the final interview. And so to avoid filtering out good people, what we said was that any woman applying goes immediately to the final interview. Now, what that did was that avoided the filter, but it didn't mean that you were going to get the job because you were a woman. Yeah. You were going to get the job because you were the best person suited for the job. Yeah. But it helped during that period of time to change the thinking within the organisation and to ensure we got a better mix of women. So that's one example. Another example was when I moved to Aston Martin, we created the first SUV, became known as the Aston Martin DBX. We did that because we found that something like 74% of all Aston Martin owners had an SUV in the garage, and often that SUV was driven by the woman of the family, and honestly, Aston was full of guys designing an SUV. And so in that instance, as well as trying to improve the diversity of the Aston Martin workforce, we also engaged a female council, essentially a parallel board structure that worked with us from the very beginning to the very end of the process. So from the layout of the vehicle, for example, making sure that the grip to the gear changes wasn't too big, assume smaller hands, to making sure that we had a wraparound door, so somebody getting in with a sari or a kimono didn't get it dirty on the sills, right the way through to the way that we engineer the product and marketed the product. So again, trying to empower the female voice to make a better vehicle. I prefer the former rather than the latter. In other words, I prefer to employ a greater degree of females into the workplace. But in the transition, the latter works very well by empowering these friends of the brand to help us make a better car. So two examples of what I think was improving the profitability of the company through the diverse way of working and empowering women in the engineering environment.
No, that's so good. And I think, you know, there sometimes can be a lot of pushback, and I'll come on to this after we've heard from Ed on this, around, you know, I think a lot of people will hear that piece around, you know, putting women straight into final interview as something that is essentially not fair. But I think where we are now, with the numbers being so bad, I think we do need to sometimes put in these measures that just break the systemic biases that we have, that then enables those women to come through, and then your interviewers start seeing the quality and the type, and then you can review all of your processes and systems to say, well, actually, in reality, we saw this, so screening those out doesn't make sense. So I think, you know, there is sometimes.
I don't think we ever put anybody in the job that wasn't qualified to go in the job.
No, because you've got that backstop at the end.
But what you do is you remove any organisational bias in making that decision.
Yeah, it's just creating a bit of a crack in that systemic bias, isn't it, to tell.
Ed, are you still with me?
I'm still with you. I think we may have lost. Oh, I wasn't sure which of us we'd lost, but it was either me or.
I'll just record that again. Sorry, that's my Wi-Fi.
No worries. Go ahead,
Right.
Susan.
Let me flip back. So Ed, perhaps you can tell us about what's worked really well for you and your organisation, your teams.
So I think I'll give two examples. The first, as we've already alluded to, it is mentoring, and I've as well as those mentoring circles, I've done and still continue to do lots of individual mentoring as well, not only for female colleagues, not only for colleagues as it happens. I also have a few mentees who are nothing to do with work, and but predominantly they have been for females, and I find that they seem to appreciate and often sort of use it as a springboard for a promotion or a new job or some other benefit. I take the role of a mentor quite broadly. So if one of my mentees is trying to tackle a problem and a friend of mine or a contact has relevant knowledge, I will link them up. So essentially extend my network to be theirs as well. And I do find it works both ways, and often their networks are helpful to me.
Yes.
And so I'm a big believer in mentoring. It does actually work both ways, as you alluded to earlier, Susan. I totally agree with that. The other thing I've done that has proved quite successful in terms of at least recognition is in making it my business to recognise success and effort. And in a period of about 2 years, when I was deputy head of a DSDL division, I got 50 different people recognised with different prizes, honours and awards for their achievements, many of whom were female, not exclusively by any means. And that really did seem to help people sort of develop, come out of their shell and really be proud of their achievements. Anything from a British Empire medal, an OBE, to I got a prize from the High Sheriff of Hampshire for somebody who'd done some great work on law and order, and lots of awards from professional bodies. There are all sorts of ways you can get people recognised, and those are the two things I could do as a fairly senior individual to help this help get a cultural change.
No, that's so good. So and of course, again, one of those classic things that goes in high performing teams is recognizing success, isn't it? And rewarding success. So that's amazing to hear. What a track record as well. And let me just draw you on that, Ed. Have you ever had resistance when advocating, don't know why I said it like that, advocating for inclusion? And how do you, if you have, how have you navigated that?
I think there are a few people who see it as a threat. My view is that if we include and get the best out of everybody, the organisations of society will be more effective and prosperous, and there will ultimately be more opportunities created. That means there'll be opportunities for everybody if we're getting the best out of our people. And I also think some of the people who resent sort of equity and so forth, when it comes to their own daughters, perhaps they would be slightly more open to it than when. So I feel I do have had a little cynicism. I challenge it if anyone says it openly to me, and I find some of the arguments from the Michael Kimmel TED Talk I mentioned quite helpful in that.
Yes.
But I find it. I suspect people are generally don't challenge me outright, but there's might be muttering behind the scenes. So I'm afraid I haven't really got a magic bullet there.
No, and Andy, I suspect you're probably, I suspect you're probably going to say you see it in your business results, the good outcomes. But have you got any specific strategies and techniques where perhaps you've tackled that resistance within your organisations?
Yeah, and look, we live in a changing world at the moment where wokeism and DEI is considered bad, and that's why I keep coming back to, as a result of a more diverse, more inclusive workforce, we make better product. And we make better product, and better product basically means better sales, better profitability, more successful company. And no one can argue with that as a point of fact. So of course you naturally get resistance to anybody different in the workforce, or somebody that gets promoted over somebody. There's always a level of resistance, but what you can't argue with is basically achievement of business plans, growth of business, growth of profitability, growth of volumes, and ultimately, I would cite Nissan at the time as an example of that, where it grew dramatically through its product portfolio, and that product portfolio was thanks in many ways to a much more diverse workforce. The inclusion of Japanese engineers with American engineers, with European engineers, with male, female, a completely different diverse portfolio that embodied the brand, which was innovation that excites. And you've got to innovate. You've got to have your best engineers to innovate, your best designers to innovate. And excitement is about excitement of all of your customers, not just some of your customers. So I believe, yes, we got resistance. Yes, we got pushback. But ultimately, you can push to the business results, and that's not wokeism. That's not exclusive, or that's about just pure financial results, and that's what a diverse workforce gives you.
Yeah, and something you touched on there around, and you both touched on this, that sort of, I think if you're feeling threatened, which you can understand people might do if you feel like things are woke, or we're doing things for targets, do you think that's one of the barriers that kind of prevents men from stepping up as effective allies, because maybe they feel a bit threatened? I don't know, I'm sort of hypothesizing there, but maybe you can, I don't know who wants to take that first.
Well,
I guess people that are no, Ed, go ahead, go, please.
Right. So I think there are, I think that's possibly one reason why some men wouldn't do it. I think a lack of awareness is a big one. I mean, I'm guilty of thinking that the gender battle was won earlier in my career, and I suddenly realised how it hasn't been, and perhaps I was in a fool's paradise. I think the lack of role models of other men allying might well be another thing I've suffered from, and now I hope I'm a role model for that. Yeah. And lack of knowledge and skills. I actually had to. I spoke to people, listened to what they said. I signed up. I've done courses. I quite memorably went on a course on how a man can be an ally in the menopause, which was quite an eye-opening course, and read and watched TED Talks and so on. So I think it's a mix of things, but I think lack of role models, fear, and lack of skills, and and perhaps a risk of putting one's foot in it by allying in the wrong way. So I think they're sort of some of the things that probably brought me to this party only in the middle of my career, not in the early days.
Yeah, no, that's so interesting. I think that point around putting your foot in it, and I think we all suffer from that. Sometimes you do hold back, don't you, because you don't want to say the wrong thing. And I think a lot of DEI, some of the terms have changed. I'm not specifically talking about gender here, but some of the terms are moving at such a fast pace that you can't always keep up with it. And you think, I'm going to use the wrong expression here and then offend everyone. And I think the only way you can come into that is to hang on to the fact that your intent is good. And if someone tells you you've used spoken out of turn, or used a term that's no longer used, all you can do is apologize, and then kind of make a mental note that you've now learned something. But it is, I know it's difficult, isn't it, because you don't want to put your foot in it. Andy, did you want to add anything to anything that Ed said there, or has he covered it all?
Well, I was just thinking, resistance normally comes from people that have got something to lose. Engineers, in this case, that probably aren't good enough. And you can see it in all walks of life, not just across the gender divide. I mean, I saw it early in my career because I left school at 16 and did an apprenticeship. I didn't go the traditional university route. I got my degrees later. But for a long time, I saw resistance of, and I can take this right the way back to even things like the Institute of Mechanical Engineers, where there was a resistance to encourage the use of apprentice-trained engineers into their body, because they didn't go through the right route. They weren't the conventional graduate. Now that's opened up now, and I think we all recognise that apprentices are an important part of your engineering facility. You can take the same, therefore, to across race and gender. Ultimately, it's simply the resistance will come from people that potentially lose out because they're not good enough. And the way I prefer to look at diversity is as a meritocracy. So if everybody is promoted on merit, then it will not matter what their background is, their race, their education, their gender. It doesn't matter. It's simply your ability to do a better job. And yes, you will get resistance from the privileged that have in the past had basically a much easier life, but it's worth fighting because you will get better products as a result of a greater diversity.
Yes, it's tricky, isn't it? It's tricky not to alienate people and bring people along on the journey. But I think what I've heard you say there, both of you, is to engage in that communication, education, use the data to showcase the outcomes that you get. We've talked quite a lot about mentorship. If we extrapolate that out, one thing that we often hear is that mentorship's come a long way, and actually a lot of women are getting that mentorship, and actually that it's not always that mentorship that's going to unlock people's careers, but in fact it's that, you know, extreme form of mentoring, which is sponsorship. And with the leadership skewed, you know, highly towards men in engineering, sponsorship is really going to be one of those keys, I think, that unlocks diversity. So, Andy, perhaps we can start with you. Can you tell us how you've used sponsorship, if you have at all, as part of your portfolio of being an ally?
I think naturally, if you're recognizing the benefit of diversity, inevitably you end up pushing people that perhaps wouldn't necessarily have got that level of support before. So you end up, in essence, sponsoring. I've always found in positions of leadership, it's good to have what I used to call technical assistants around you, people that came very close to you, essentially your chief of staff. And I've always picked basically young talent, more normally than not female talent, that basically shadows me for a year and then swapped out and pushed back into the mainstream. But essentially, because you get close to those individuals, because you know those individuals, because they're loyal by nature, they become an influence for you back in the workforce, and you become an influence for them. So I found that method of, it's not what you would strictly call stewardship, but it's a way of rotating people through an important position. They get educated more quickly than they would otherwise. They get exposed to the pros and cons of senior leadership, the reasons why decisions are made and not always obvious why. But you also create an advocate of those decisions back in the workplace as you rotate people through. So just an example, but I always found that example to be very useful. And as I said, more often than not, those technical assistants are female.
Yeah, and I think that the other piece of that is really by bringing those women with you, you're showcasing, they're having the opportunity to showcase at those top levels what their capabilities are. And I think that's the bit that really unlocks people's careers, isn't it? That people get to know who they are, what they can do. And so as they go back into the business, they're known to other leaders when opportunities come up.
Engenders self-confidence. So perhaps women engineers get it bashed out of them, but giving that self-confidence back, empowering them, knowing that people are listening to their ideas and acting on it, I think creates that more powerful projection of those people. So it does that by nature of you know, they're empowered with in this case me, giving them that voice, and I think that's really useful for again for that education process.
Yeah, and Ed, maybe I can come to you here. Do you think it's that having visibly diverse decision making that kind of expresses the look of a truly inclusive engineering workplace, or do you think it's perhaps something else?
That's in many ways, I'm not sure I've ever seen a truly diverse looking decision-making body to know the answer to that question. And of course, even if people look the same, there might be some diversities that were hidden that we don't know. So I really am not sure I can answer that. I was going to say that it's that I think that we can, though, if one is in a decision-making role, it is possible to try and sort of get at least diverse sources of information, and Andrew has described some of that really effectively, and I won't rehash that. But I also think that as a leader, the sort of, as you sort of touching on your earlier question, creating opportunities for the people that one is mentoring, I found really helpful in terms of helping them develop. And so I think there's an opportunity to lean out, as it were, but unfortunately I've not been in many areas where there has been a truly diverse, or at least an apparently diverse decision-making body to know the answer to that.
Okay. One thing I'd like to cover in this talk is there's been a lot in the media lately around how we educate our young men, and I'd like to ask you both, how can the next generation of engineers ensure allyship becomes part of an expectation we have of the young men coming into the industry, and not just an exception, as you two have had to create this path for yourselves? Ed, I don't know if you're ready to take that first, or Andy. I don't mind.
I think I would hope that the curricula in our sort of either universities or via apprenticeships are more inclusive, and these issues come up far more often than they did when I was an undergraduate. I know that, so for instance, as a mathematician, I know that there are now often modules in things like ethics and using maths for the good of society, which there wasn't a thing sort of 25 years ago. So I would hope that is making nudging things in the right direction. And in certain disciplines, I would hope there are a higher proportion of female members coming into the profession, but I haven't got the statistics. You'd know that better than me. But I hope there's a chance, but it won't. I don't think it will happen by osmosis for possibly generations to come. I think the more I think about it, the more this will need concerted effort and visible leadership and sponsorship.
Yeah. Andy, do you want to comment on that?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I agree with Ed. There was some moments we perhaps thought that this was almost solved, and that things were changing, and this coming generation is more open-minded. But I'm not sure that that's the case. Obviously, advocacy for women, it has to start at home. Has to start, with your own children, and the people around you, that it's important. Ultimately, though, if we're talking engineering, we don't get enough women coming into engineering. There's a natural filtering that seems to happen at school, and so we've got to get better advocacy for engineering in the schools, that it is not simply a male preserve, that it is a normal and natural place for women to aspire to. After all, there's a fairly equal proportion of men and women that are good at mathematics or good at physics. Why would we therefore filter them out later in their life? So somewhere along the lines, we've still got to do a lot of work about promoting STEM in schools, and pulling those talented individuals, male or female, but basically through into engineering, where they can make a jolly good living. And look, there's a shortage of engineers. So if you like, start from that as a motivation. There's a great living to be made being an engineer in this country, or in most countries, in fact, and that basically use your talent, use your natural attributes, good at maths, good at physics, good at chemistry, whatever, channel them into engineering. By increasing the pool of potential engineers, you'll see a greater proportion find their way through to leadership, I believe. So I think what I'm saying is, it doesn't necessarily just start in the workplace. It has to start in the school and at home.
I think that's, that is right. I think what I would say is that there's also work to do when people get there, because we are seeing, I mean, Ed sort of gave a bit of nod to statistics. It's glacially slow expanding that pipeline, and worse still, that mid to senior leadership women are leaving. We're just about to start doing a piece of research, or the Royal Academy of Engineering is just about to start doing a piece of research that we're supporting on, around why is that? What is it that's making the industry kind of not attractive to women in that mid to senior leadership? So I guess hopefully that will give us some places to start looking, so that we can build action plans around that. So
can I just chip in? There's another point,
yes,
I think, that we don't often talk about that's could be quite important here, is that there are loads of professions where there's the problem is the other way, that they're almost all female, and there's no real lack of diversity because of the lack of male members of the profession. And I think, is there merit in our professions, societies like the WES, comparing notes with equivalent societies in other professions to see whether we can do something to sort of even the playing field? Because I do worry that there's a real lack of diversity in the other direction, that people seem to care about less.
I think that's right, and two things I would say about that. One is, I think people, so if we take something like HR, the difficulty is it's not a straight comparator, in that quite often, obviously HR is very heavily female, but you will quite often see the head of HR being male, disproportionately male. So I think there is something to look in there, but it's not the same, because you still get this kind of Mad Men scenario where the upper echelons are still more male, or disproportionately male based on who's coming through. So I think there is something in that, and I think we typically haven't cared about that, we meaning society, because there are so many opportunities for men. They're still making it to the top in HR, and you know, so there hasn't been a focus on that. But I agree with you, there's always merit in looking across to adjacencies, to seeing what can be learned. So it's a good point, and we do. I've got a good piece around asking when my children were small what they thought typically male professions were and typically female professions, but that's for another podcast, I think. So we're going to wrap up now, and it'd be really lovely for both of you if you could share one piece of advice with men who are looking to you for how they can be better allies in engineering. So Ed, let's start with you.
So I would say just take one step. Everything starts with the first step, and I think it could be watching the TED Talk I described by Michael Kimmel. If you're more a reader, then books like this, which is called X+Y, a Mathematician's Manifesto for Rethinking Gender by Eugenia Cheng, or plenty of books on the subject are around. It will open your eyes, and it might then inspire you to work out how you align what you're passionate about and good at with making society better in this issue.
Amazing. Some really solid recommendations there. Thank you, Ed. And Andy, last word with you.
Well, I would say look beyond the obvious. During your career, you'll do much better if you have surrounded yourself with smart people. Smart people around you are not to be feared, they're to be utilized. And believe me, in my experience, most of the people in the room were much cleverer than me. Now, when I say people, I mean the best talent. And if you look beyond the gender, if you look beyond the race, if you look beyond the education program, in other words, it doesn't matter. You look for that meritocracy, you look for that performance, you look for that skill. It can even be as stark as the introvert and the extrovert. And there's a book called Quiet that I would recommend on that particular subject.
Quiet.
Quite quiet, yes.
Yeah.
It just looks for the quietest person in the room is often the most thoughtful.
Yeah.
And so if you're managing a group of individuals, you want the best team around you and you want to bring the most out of them. Ultimately, surround yourself by those best people, and by statistical norms, 50% of them will be female.
Yeah. Yeah. No, good solid advice. And you know, if we wanted to sort of take away the EDI piece, it is just good leadership advice, isn't it?
Yes.
Educate yourself, surround yourself with the best people. No, that's really great. It's been really lovely to speak to both of you today, bring you together. I hope you'll both stay in touch. I know you hadn't met before this call, but we really need allies such as both of you in engineering. So we're really grateful for all the work you do and for doing this INWED talk for INWED 25. So thank you to you both.